As the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. You know that, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. I made peace. Remember, Hillary said, he will take us into war. No, I took us out of all these wars. I got us out of Syria, got us out of Iraq. I protected Israel. They would have been in a big problem.
Said is we want to depressurize, de-escalate, and ultimately integrate the Middle East region. The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
I am in Israel. About this time yesterday, I was jogging behind me in the old city when I got an urgent call from my chief of staff telling me to get back to the hotel as quickly as I could, that Israel was under attack. There were thousands of rockets being launched. When I got back to the hotel, I joined others in the bomb shelter or the stairwells of the hotel. Frightened faces. There were children and elderly families, many Americans. There was a sense of fear and worry, and a knowledge to many of us that there were horrific things going on around the country at that time.
We have mobilized, we have called up approximately 100,000 Israeli troops. They are now organizing and preparing to launch an attack at Hamas in Gaza. And as we speak, we are also striking their military targets inside the Gaza Strip.
The astonishing Hamas assault comes after decades of relentless and bitter conflict with Israel, the fighting costing thousands of lives and forcing generations to grow up under occupation. The militant group claims this assault is payback for Israeli atrocities against Palestinians, including what it calls the desecration of a holy mosque in East Jerusalem and a 16-year blockade of Gaza.
Break it down just a little bit on the maps of the region. Trey mentioned a lot of the dynamics around the state of Israel. So just to orient into the map, this is the state of Israel right here. And they're surrounded effectively by enemies of their state. You mentioned the Gaza Strip controlled by Hamas. That's in the southern part of the country. Up north, you have Hezbollah, which is strongly supported by Syria and Iran over here. And then you have the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, which has Islamic Jihad and Hamas fighters there as well. So with this attack in the south out of the Gaza Strip, Hamas is hoping that fighters in Hezbollah in the north in Lebanon and in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem might join in that fight. But let's zoom in just a little bit to the southern part of the country, which is where Trey is this morning. So as I mentioned, this is the Gaza Strip. It was controlled by Israel for decades. In 2005, it was given over to the Palestinian Authority as part of a peace deal. Well, within 2 years, Hamas, a terrorist organization, took over the Gaza Strip. And they have for years been collecting rockets, building tunnels, attempting to infiltrate the south of Israel and commit terrorist attacks against the population there. I've spent a lot of time in the south of Israel, in those communities like Sderot, right here, right on the edge where you can see that border fence and where there are reports of casualties of Israeli civilians. Now, a lot of military defense facilities for the IDF here, too. But one of the things to note is that as Hamas has gained power, they've gained sophistication with their rockets and ability to hit. So these red spots are spots where, on the map, according to the IDF, Israeli rockets have hit. This is Jerusalem right here. There are reports that there have been strikes inside Jerusalem as well. Tel Aviv is up here. Rockets used to only be able to hit adjacent communities. Now they're able to reach further into the state of Israel, into civilian populations. And because it was 2,000 to 3,000 rockets, guys, is what we're hearing this morning, the IDF famously has the Iron Dome batteries that are there to shoot them down. They couldn't shoot them all down. And so the IDF is responding from places like Jerusalem to the south to try to take back territory that a terrorist organization stated by our country and others in Hamas is holding Israelis hostages and pulled many of them back into the Gaza Strip, which is completely controlled by a terrorist organization. So, guys, the lesson has been throughout time, if you give land over to radical Islamists, they're going to do what radical Islamists do, which is to seek Israel's destruction and wipe them off the map. And so they use what little international aid they get. they channel it not toward their people and building schools and building hospitals, but into building tunnels and supplying weapons to their terrorist fighters, all of which somehow was kept mostly under wraps. It sounds like Israel is mostly surprised by this. This is a sophisticated attack. I mean, as someone who's been involved in ground infantry operations, to coordinate air and land, and it sounds like maybe even sea with paragliders and motorcycles and bulldozers, this was something somehow they kept out of the reach of Israeli intelligence and sprung surprise on a holy day.
Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free out of Israel! Out of Israel! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I'll be so fly. I'll be so fly. I'll be so fly. I'll be so fly. I'll be so fly.
Friday night, interesting timing. Friday night, during the quiet part of the media cycle when no one's paying attention, the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, released $75 million into Palestine, into areas that are heavily Hamas areas. Now, internal memos in the administration, internal White House emails are suggested in the last year that there was great risk of increased violence due to this money, and the administration in writing said go ahead with it anyway. So these are troubling issues. I'm glad that the Republicans came out and criticized them, but you know, President Trump last night was talking about the Abraham Accords. He's got a good point. You know, that there was peace and prosperity in the Middle East. You see, we're on the verge of an agreement between the Saudis. Remember, the Abraham Accords didn't include the Saudis. Remember, the Abraham Accords didn't include the Saudis. We're on the verge of this Israel and the Saudis getting together, and
that's right. And could that all be at risk now?
I think so. I mean, Iran was obviously behind this, and that's probably what.
Israel has declared a state of war after a surprise attack launched by Hamas. Dozens of gunmen from the Palestinian militant group have infiltrated southern Israel from the Gaza Strip, firing thousands of rockets as far north as Tel Aviv. It's one of the most serious escalations in years between Israel and Hamas, who control the Gaza Strip. Israel's defence minister has vowed that Israel will win this war.
Hamas has made a grave mistake this morning. It launched a war against the state of Israel. Israeli Defence Forces troops are fighting against the enemy at every location of infiltration. I call on all citizens to follow the security instructions from the Home Front Command. The State of Israel will win this war.
So Palestinian militants in Gaza, they've launched these dozens of rocket strikes at Israel, setting off air raid sirens right across the country. Gaza residents say they heard armed clashes along the separation fence with Israel and saw significant movement of armed fighters. The ambulance teams dispatched to areas in southern Israel near Gaza, and residents were warned to stay inside.
Deaths toll from a deadly earthquake of magnitude 6.3 that jolted western Afghanistan on Saturday.
Close to 2,000 people have died following a powerful earthquake in Afghanistan yesterday. That's according to the Taliban, which released those numbers this morning. The 6.3 magnitude quake struck the heart of Herat city in the western Herat province, which is the third largest in Afghanistan. The quake was followed by multiple aftershocks.
A magnitude 6.3 earthquake followed by strong aftershocks rocked the region. 6 villages have been destroyed near the city of Herat. Rescue and recovery efforts are currently underway. Thousands of people displaced and forced to take shelter in the city's abandoned buildings. It is one of the deadliest earthquakes to hit the country in 20 years.
into those small, tiny communities around the border, peaceful kibbutzim, people on a Saturday morning, on a Jewish holiday, on the Jewish Sabbath. Anyhow, it's going to be a terrible fight now. And what I'm worried about is that as the Israelis are stretched out in Gaza and as they're doing what they must do, particularly to retrieve those more than 100 hostages, infants, children, women, that at that point the Iranians will use their other proxy, Hezbollah, to attack from the north. And Hezbollah is even more well-armed than Hamas, and they have 150,000 rockets, some of them very long range, so they'll put everything into that if they do attack. I think this is all a cover, Amanda, for something that's happening in 2 weeks' time. It's the anniversary of the uprising in Iran, and Iran doesn't want any international attention on that. And in those 2 weeks, the International Atomic Energy Agency says that Iran will achieve enough fissile uranium to build its first atom bomb. God help us all if the Ayatollah regime gets atomic weapons.
Gaza, a tiny area only 40 kilometres long and 11 kilometres wide, and one of the most contested pieces of land in history. Held by the Ottoman Empire until 1917, when it was put under British control. After the Second World War, thousands of Jews fled Europe in the wake of the Holocaust, and the United Nations split Palestinian territory into Arab and Jewish states in 1947. Leader David Ben-Gurion founded the State of Israel in 1948, and from that moment it was under assault from its Arab neighbours. Egypt attacked Israel through the Gaza Strip, and while Israel won the war, Gaza remained under the control of Egypt, and Palestinian refugees poured in. Numerous insurgencies and the Six-Day War followed, Israel making territorial conquests, including Gaza and the Sinai Desert from Egypt, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan. But in 1973, a huge blow to its security forces.
It is an all-out war.
The Yom Kippur War, an invasion by Egypt and Syria that Israel's military did not see coming. While ceasefires were agreed with Arab neighbours, tensions remained. The seeds of the current conflict were sown after Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005 and militant group Hamas seized control. Hamas, listed as a terrorist group by countries including Australia, started the campaign to destroy the Israeli state. Israel responded with an invasion in 2008, in which an estimated 1,000 people were killed. It invaded again in 2014, which saw 2,200 killed in Gaza, along with 73 Israelis. A flashpoint throughout has been the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, Islam's third holiest site, built on Judaism's holiest, the Temple Mount. Recent visits by hard-right members of Israel's government inflaming tensions. It's one of the reasons Hamas gave for yesterday's shocking assault, which came almost 50 years to the day since the Yom Kippur.
Let's turn to the war in Israel, entering now its third day. NBC's Kelly Kobayea is in Tel Aviv with the latest here. Kelly, what exactly can you tell us about where the tensions currently stand out there in Israel?
Well, we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister shortly, sometime at the top of the hour, according to his office, letting us know just about an hour ago that he was going to speak. In the meantime, his office has released a statement strongly denying these reports that Egypt had warned Israel that there was some sort of attack in the works days ago, and that warning was effectively ignored. In the statement, the office calls it absolutely false, saying that no message in advance has arrived from Egypt, and the Prime Minister had neither spoken nor met with the head of Egyptian intelligence since the formation of his government. So a very strong pushback to those reports that the government, in fact, did have a warning. The Israeli government is saying not so. Meantime, the IDF, the Israeli military, says that there are intensifying their counteroffensive against Gaza at this hour. They say that between Saturday and Monday, they struck about 1,200 targets. They say they've stepped that up. They've doubled that just today. They say that they're hitting weapons storage, manufacturing sites, command and control centers, and rocket launchers inside Gaza. But keeping in mind, this is an incredibly densely packed urban area with 2.3 million people. The vast majority, or a lot of them, are civilians. There are women and children inside Gaza. There are potentially, if you believe the numbers put forward by some Palestinian militants inside Gaza, potentially 130 hostages in that territory as well. The United Nations says that power has been cut off. There could be food and medicine shortages to come if, in fact, Israel does maintain this siege on Gaza, which they have promised to do.
With you on some of those divisions. Yesterday, almost all of your Republican rivals blamed the Biden administration for this attack, as I just discussed with the secretary, citing the deal they made with Iran. You just saw the Secretary of State effectively say there is no link between that deal and the horrific attacks that unfolded yesterday. Do you think it was irresponsible of your rivals to level that allegation without any evidence or proof?
I actually think it was irresponsible for Secretary Blinken to say that the $6 billion doesn't weigh in here. I mean, let's be honest with the American people and understand that Hamas knows and Iran knows they're moving money around as we speak because they know $6 billion is going to be released. That's the reality. When I was at the United Nations, you saw that when those planes full of cash sent by Obama to Iran, I went to the International Atomic Energy Agency. I met with them. What happened was those funds were sent to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They were sent to Hamas in Gaza. They were sent to the Houthis in Yemen. They go and spread terrorism every time they get a dollar. It doesn't go to the Iranian people. It does go to terrorist attacks. And Secretary Blinken's just wrong to imply that this money is not being moved around as we speak
and yet,
to hurt those that love freedom.
And yet, Ambassador, there's just no proof of that yet. This is just the hours after that immediate attack. Is it irresponsible to level that charge when you really don't have any evidence of that at this point in time?
The evidence is, look at what the Iranian people have done to freedom-loving people around the world. Look at what the Iranian people, the Iranian regime has done to threaten Israel over the years. To think that they're not moving money around is irresponsible to say that to the American people. They are moving money around to threaten those they hate. They hate Israel. They hate America. They are going to continue to use this. It was wrong to release the $6 billion, but let me tell you what else was wrong. It was wrong to go and have that debacle in Afghanistan. It was wrong to waive sanctions on Iran that gave them even more money. Money has been flowing to Iran, and that is the problem, because when Iran gets money, they use it for hate.
And Ambassador Haley, just to be clear again, the Secretary of State said categorically...
Second, but this country is just headed so badly. The Israeli attack was made because we are perceived as being weak and ineffective and with a really weak leader, and we will discuss it in a few minutes. But isn't that a shame what's happening all over the world? Things are not what they were just 3 years ago. You take a look. They weren't ever as good, and now they are really probably maybe the worst we've ever seen in terms of our country. When you look at the Afghanistan pullout, you ever see anything like that? The most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. The Hamas terrorist invasion of Israeli territory, and the murder of Israeli soldiers today, and the brutal murder of citizens is an act of savagery that must and will be crushed. It has to be dealt with very powerfully. This is a time where the United States needs leadership. We don't have leadership. But Israel is at war, and the United States obviously is going to stick with Israel, and strongly. The war happened for two reasons. The United States is giving and gave to Iran $6 billion, $6 billion, over hostages. And, you know, there was a very good trade. They got 5 hostages. we got 5 hostages. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news is, and their hostages were tough, by the way, I have to tell you. That was, okay, let's assume they're doing just fine. But it was 5 for 5. But in addition to that, we agreed to free up $6 billion. And that is an absolute disaster. And I would not be at all surprised if part of that tremendous wealth that they just accumulated went into all of a sudden watching this level of aggression. They didn't have that level of aggression with me. They didn't have it. This would have never happened with me either. You know what wouldn't have happened? Ukraine wouldn't have happened. Taiwan and all this tough talk with Taiwan wouldn't have happened. And what's going on with Israel right now, people were shocked. I wasn't shocked because 2 weeks ago we gave them $6 billion. Think of it. So we get 5, they get 5, but the difference is we have to give $6 billion. $6 billion! Does anyone know what a billion is? $6 billion. It's like it's water. And we have now, our country is a perceived, you know, we're really a country that's looked at with this tremendous perceived weakness with a grossly incompetent and corrupt president. He's an incompetent man. He's corrupt. I don't know if he makes it to the starting gate. I hope, I guess in a way he does.